Okay, so it might seem a bit weird to start with civil service institutions, and you're going, hang on a minute, is she saying that the civil service is the centre of the rule of law? No, that's not what I'm saying. The reason that I started with the civil service is because I want to draw a distinction between where the belief system that shapes institutions are and how it is that the forces shaping them can kind of bypass the notice of people in charge. Now, when the post-war settlement was established during World War II, there was a brain boost in Whitehall. Like, there were a lot of very, very clever people. The country was mobilised to create these big centrally planned systems to deal with a war, you know, to deal with an actual war. So this was forged through crisis. And if you read Nick Timmins' Five Giants, a biography of the welfare state, you can actually see records of Beveridge and John Maynard Keynes' phone calls over how we were going to resolve these new institutional arrangements that were being established as a result of these ideas. So you can see very much kind of how this has all been kind of one massive crisis, and then it kind of all developed because we're in a period of stability after that where everything kind of developed separately a little bit. So even though John Maynard Keynes was talking to Beveridge about how to sorry, the door went. So you can see from the conversations that Beveridge and Keynes have that this is actually about them kind of trying to find a way to refashion existing institutional infrastructure around these new ideas. But the key development in the welfare state is not anything that they established at that point, but the evolution in the rule of law. And it's the establishment of rights and the establishment of a path through which those rights will develop. And that's the rules and systems that I'm talking about. So since that point, since the 40s, even though we've had kind of a trend of, you know, a belief that institutions are bad, and we've had think tanks established to bypass institutional structure, we've had all sorts going on in the last. By and large, our civil service institutions have been the kind of bedrock to deliver these policies, and have been shaped by forces like the ones I'm discussing, the changing family structure, the changing roles of women, our evolving understanding of violence and power dynamics. But the belief system at the core of this did not do this. Now, I want to kind of jump you forward from these conversations in the 40s to where we are now. So there's a few economists who I have in a group in my head. And they're the reason that I kind of knew that the LSE was looking for a multi-dimensional understanding of inequality like that was represented in social work, but I don't think they fully know what that means yet. And that's an economist called Anthony Atkinson, who wrote a really good book. I can't remember what the actual title is. I'll find it and put it underneath. It's Inequality and What to Do About It or something. James Galbraith is another one. He does a really simple overarching what we don't understand about inequality. And Thomas Piketty's Capital in the 21st Century does the same. Because all he did was he picked one stream of data, looked at it over a long period of time and realised that, you know, mathematical synthetic modelling was bonk. Now, basically, the difference between maths and economics is that the context changes around economic modelling. So it can't be static. And actually, the rule of law is the context that's changed around these economic models, just as kind of Hayek said that it would. Now, I'm going to refer you to a scholar called Kimberly Crenshaw, and intersectionality is basically the word that encompasses the development of the systems that I'm talking about. And I did a video to Sally Hines a while ago about the difference between my understanding of intersectionality, which has come from being the social worker and the function that reflects on the rule of law around power dynamics and abuse and marginalisation, and comparing that to the word salad that you're seeing behind the word TERF. And that's the kind of split that we're at here. TERF is basically telling you which institutions are currently reliant on bullshit theoretical models, and these batshit I identify as disciplines. And if you read Anthony Atkinson, James Galbraith, Thomas Piketty, what they're saying is we, in economics, using these models, we have no context for this data, and we have these brand new data capabilities, we have these new abilities to actually understand all these institutions and how they fit together, but we just can't see it, and we've spent so long in the dark that we don't know. And the reflection on the rule of law that I'm talking about happens in marginalised professions like social work and nursing and teaching. And what you've seen through TERF is the role of working together guidance, in that this is the rule of law upheld as a relationship between professionals, parents and government. And it's actually to uphold power dynamics and to protect from existing power dynamics that we understand. And it's actually, this is what's, people at policymaking level don't understand that this is the tension that they're looking for, because this is where systems join together around all these vulnerable people. So this is the actual limits of the system. And they're not aware of this yet. So these crises are being generated to make them aware and push that crisis to them. And basically, they can't accommodate things like changing family structures because they're using synthetic models with a family structure which assumes that women are owned in the middle of it, which is bollocks, which is shaping all our policy. And instead of this understanding of this system development that I've got because I was trained to reflect on it, they have these bullshit economic models that have been dead for quite a while. And we're in the process of a very big correction, not just around the turf issue, not just around the systems that I'm talking about, but which go back to these economists and policymakers and say, you are not aware of the system that you're shaping. And what the left are providing with their fucking mental internet stuff and the anti-Semitism and the abuse of women is they're showing that this is them protecting their identity from having to acknowledge that this context has changed around them and they can't see these systems. So the reason I started with civil service institutions is because the people who are behind policymaking at the moment, they just assume that these institutions are functioning because they always have. And actually, because of the belief system that we've had in the last 30 years, we have basically hollowed out, like we've kind of basically stripped out the main output of institutions because economists can't measure it and replaced it with more efficient, measurable tasks, which is then, it changes the character of institutions, makes them more oppressive, makes, you know, it means the undermining the rule of law is a really... that causes problems and it causes instability because you get people like me going, hang on a minute, the law applies here and you're undermining it and this is undermining my faith in democracy, and bad shit starts happening when people don't have faith in the rule of law and democracy. And at the minute a lot of people don't, and quite rightly so. But by and large, because the rule of law is quite stable in this country, this is really just a crisis that's exposing which institutions are not aware of it. Now the other reason I wanted to start with a civil service institution, because it's not just like the laws that are upheld by the people within an institution. What also matters with state institutions is the law that's at their roots. So I said earlier, you can't really do much about an institution once it's established. It's going to go through to its natural conclusion. When you have responsibilities which can't be abdicated, and when economics is a discipline where the context changes around it and periodically there are crises and we have to reassess that thinking, we should have systems which anticipate this, but we don't. And we don't have systems which can use it. So what we're being presented with now, with Brexit as the framework, is the first opportunity since the late 70s to really, really address this synthesis of institutions, particularly around abuse and violence. And actually this couldn't have been done in the late 70s because most of the shifts that I'm talking about weren't fully evident then. So this is the first opportunity we've had to have it. But the reason I opened with the civil service is because this is the bedrock of institutions. It's the institutions that keep us stable, and the institutions that uphold the rule of law that have been eroded. And I'm going to kind of go through a few systems in these playlists, and I wanted to kind of use this video to show that the belief system that's shaping institutions is currently saying we can't see these systems. Austerity has just lashed out of them, and left and right were all agreed on which systems would be harmed, and it would be these ones dealing with vulnerable people and violence and abuse and risk, because the belief system they've got can't see it. And then all that's really happened is their entire system is set up, and they've just repeated this cycle with TERF, and they'll repeat it again. But TERF is kind of the last point in, really, because we've just gone shut the fuck up and devalued the word. So I'm going to play that back and I'm going to see if it makes sense.